Our brains function really well in chaos. If you need somebody to make sense in chaos, we're your guys. People with ADHD are naturally attracted to entrepreneurship for a variety of reasons. I was attracted to self-employment, then entrepreneurship and scaling a company because all of my traits were functional in the context of early stage entrepreneurship.
What are the characteristics that you see the most for ADHD entrepreneurs who lock in and get it?
The one trait that seems to be the most advantageous is resilience. For every trait, there is a downside and an upside. It's the yin and the yang. So if you can manage the downside and allow that upside to really flourish, that's where the magic is.
There is this sort of tendency to go either way. So tell me more about how you balance that.
So the key is that it's all contextual.
My very special guest today is John M. Torrens. He's a 3-time Inc. 5000 entrepreneur, TEDx speaker on ADHD as an entrepreneur superpower, and author of Lightning in a Bottle: How Entrepreneurs Can Harness Their ADHD to Win. He's professor of entrepreneurial practice at Syracuse University's Whitman School of Management and host of the Total Entrepreneur podcast. Let's get into the episode. Hey, it's Steve, and I've got a quick announcement for you. The next cohort of my life-changing Focus Formula program starts March 24th. The Focus Formula has now helped over 100 ADHD entrepreneurs turn their brilliant chaos into consistent growth and freedom. In 6 weeks, you'll build a weekly system that works with your ADHD brain to help you prioritize what matters, get started with ease, and stay focused through the finish, so you can end each week feeling calmer, capable, and proud of your progress. You'll get daily co-working sessions, weekly live coaching sessions with me, and a host of other bonuses in the program that's built specifically to help ADHD brains succeed. And the first 10 to apply get a bonus private dashboard build session with me. So if you're interested, apply today because those spots won't last long. You can get all the details and apply at steveaugustcoaching.com/focus. Hope to see you there. And now on to our episode. Hello again, it's Steve August back with another episode of ADHD Entrepreneur Accelerator. So glad you're with me today. And I am so excited today because I have somebody who I just recently met and really excited to bring this to you because he's done a lot of work in the ADHD world, both as an entrepreneur, as a professor, and as an advocate. So let me introduce our guest for today, and then he is Dr. John Torrens. And Dr. Torrens is an award-winning professor of entrepreneurial practice and a 3-time Inc. 5000 entrepreneur. He is a healthcare education entrepreneur with 25 years leading high-growth companies with experience in developing high-performing teams, raising capital, and both buy-sell side of M&A. Dr. Torrens is a faculty member of the Syracuse University Whitman School of Management's Department of Entrepreneurship and Emerging Enterprises and co-founder and president of Sprout Therapy Group. He is also an early-stage investor in companies in cannabis, hospitality, and health tech AI. He is a frequent guest speaker and executive education instructor in the areas of entrepreneurship, strategy, and corporate innovation. Dr. Torrens is also a TEDx speaker, ADHD as an Entrepreneur Superpower, and author of the book Lightning in a Bottle: How Entrepreneurs Can Harness Their ADHD to Win. He is an active member of Young Presidents Organization, YPO, and served in multiple volunteer leadership positions, including a term on the International Board of Directors from 2013 to 2015. Most recently, he is the podcast host of the Total Entrepreneur Mind, Body, and Spirit, where he talks about the performance advantages entrepreneurs can gain by prioritizing their mental, physical, and spiritual health. Dr. John Torrens, welcome to ADHD Entrepreneur Accelerator. It's so awesome to have you on this podcast.
Thanks for having me. Really great to be here.
Yeah. So where in the world do we find you today?
Today I am in Costa Rica. I've got a group of students coming down for a spring break trip in a few days. So I got here in advance just to make sure everything was good for them. You know, somebody's got to do it.
That's a beautiful location to be. So is that a facility that you have, or is it a place where you host students, or tell us?
Yeah, there's a retreat center that we use for them. So that
sounds amazing. Amazing. How often do you hold those retreats?
So this will be the second year we've done it, but at Syracuse University's Whitman School, we've been really trying to do a lot of more international immersion experiences for our students, just so they, understand how business works outside of the U.S. So Latin America was my duty. So it's pretty fun.
Awesome. That's amazing. It sounds great. It's someone who's led retreats myself. That sounds like an amazing location. Locations so often make the experience. There's so much I want to talk to you about. I was going through your book, Lightning in a Bottle, but I think it would be really helpful for our listeners to understand more about your journey. You've accomplished so much over time, and you've done it with ADHD. Just tell us, what has your journey been with ADHD? When did it first like show up on the scene in terms of your awareness of it?
I think I was aware of it as a kid, although I didn't really know what it was, right? So my ADHD is hyperactive impulsive, right? And not so much the inattentive, that those aren't my traits. So, I was the kid in elementary school who would just blurt out the answers without raising my hand. I'd get my work done early and then bother everybody else. And, I was a distraction for other kids. I was easily distracted, but apparently I was charming enough that my teachers really liked me. And so that definitely helped. Right. But I kind of knew it early on. And I knew that, I had to take extra time to do things that just didn't seem to come as easily to me as some of the other kids. Even though I knew I was smart, just some things didn't come that naturally. And I found that I had to advocate for myself a lot. I had to ask for help when I needed it. And I had to set up my environment, even as a young kid, where I could get the things done that I needed to get done. And that was a pretty early awareness. So, and then that just kind of, that went through my entire life, right? Is that hyperactivity, impulsivity especially, and all those traits that go along with it. And, I know from my own research that people with ADHD are naturally attracted to entrepreneurship for a variety of reasons, which maybe we can talk about later. And I was no different. I was attracted to self-employment and entrepreneurship and scaling a company because all of my traits were functional in the context of early stage entrepreneurship, and I could flourish there. And I did really well in the early stages of new venture creation. And it wasn't until later in the ventures where, coherent application of resources and policies and procedures and those types of things became important, where the wheels started to fall off the bus a little bit. And I started thinking, wow, I thought I was good at this. Apparently, I'm not that good at it. So I was working with a CEO coach at the time who recommended that, yeah, maybe I talk to somebody about an ADHD diagnosis. And that's where it started.
It's really interesting how what you just sort of described there, in that something that I experienced in my own entrepreneurial journey is like being really awesome at starting at the beginning, at the early stages where you're wearing a lot of hats, where you're learning, constantly learning, making connections, where you're evangelizing and enrolling people, whether it's team members or investors. But then when it becomes a time to scale and it becomes more of an operational, incremental, methodical, like over time, the ADHD brains often can struggle with that because there's not the levels of like novelty, dopamine, excitement that there was at the beginning.
Our brains function really well in chaos. Like if you need somebody to make sense in chaos, we're your guys, right? We can do that better than most people. And sometimes we'll create chaos where none exists just so we feel comfortable, right? And of course, that's not a good place to lead a growing company from. But yeah, there is a point in every new venture's life cycle where and I hate to say grows beyond the capabilities of an ADH founder, because it's really not that. It requires different things. It requires things that maybe we aren't inherently wired for. And that recognition that, okay, at some point, if we value the venture and the future and the wealth creation of it, we've got to be aware enough to realize that maybe we've got to step aside or bring in a manager or hire a professional to do the things that we would like to do if only we could, or if we were good at it, so that we can focus on the things that we are phenomenal at that other people just can't do as well. And I think that's a really important recognition. And once that light switch went on for me, things really started to work. And I didn't really change a whole lot except for what I was doing personally in the company.
That makes so much sense. And that was my experience too. Once I found somebody I could work with who could take on the operational side of things, everybody was a lot happier.
Right. Yeah. I'm
Everybody.
sure you were too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll share this story. I actually had my management team do an intervention with me. I walked into my office and they were waiting for me. And they're like, I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, Steve, what you're asking us to do is just nuts. Like, we don't have the resources. We're not doing, and it was just basically this intervention. And looking back, I'm like, oh, the whole ADHD thing was really what was in play there. And was like trying to operate from that point of view. So, and it brings me to this statement that you made in Lightning in a Bottle in your book. And it said, it is important not to stigmatize or romanticize ADHD and entrepreneurship. And I thought that was so on point, because there is this sort of tendency to go either way. Like, it's a superpower. No, it's, a devastating challenge. So tell me more about how you balance that.
Yeah, so the key is that it's all contextual, right? So I like to use the example of Yao Ming, the basketball player, right? He's 7 foot plus. In the context of playing basketball, his enormous height is an advantage, right? But when he's trying to sit in a human-sized chair in a conference room, his size is a decided disadvantage. And it's very similar with ADHD in the context of entrepreneurship. So, if you have traits consistent with hyperactive and impulsive ADHD, in the context of entrepreneurship, those can be exceptionally advantageous. And I call them a superpower. However, they're only advantageous if you're managing the downside, because for every trait, there is a downside and an upside. It's the yin and the yang, right? So every single trait, if it's managed well, it works for you. But if it doesn't manage, it doesn't work, right? So think of this, entrepreneurs are famous for their high propensity for risk, right? So when that's working for you, when your high propensity for risk is functional and it's helping, you look brave and visionary and you're taking risks where other people were too weak to do it and you knew the opportunity was there, and it's great. When it's dysfunctional, on the other hand, it looks like you're reckless and you're shooting from the hip and you're not thinking things through. So, same trait, same circumstance, it's either functional or dysfunctional depending on the context. So that's where my work has been focused for the past few years, is trying to get at, okay, well, how do we set the stage so these traits that we have can tilt more towards the functional and advantageous and avoid the dysfunctional? Because I mean, as well as I do, there are all sorts of really negative effects of ADHD. I mean, people with ADHD are more likely to have anxiety, depression, other mental health disabilities. They're more likely to be fired from their job. They're more likely to go bankrupt, more likely to get divorced. There's a lot of terrible things that can result. So if you can manage the downside and allow that upside to really flourish and bring out those natural advantages, that's where the magic is. And that's what I've been focused on.
I think that's so important because, there's sort of an ADHD industry now. And one of the things they throw around is like, depending on what studies they're looking at, people with ADHD are 500% more likely to become entrepreneurs. But they don't really talk about, like, and that could be everywhere from 100 to 500%. But there's a lot of like kind of glamorizing of it, saying. And something that I think was really interesting in your book was actually looking at, well, does that actually correlate to entrepreneurial success? Right? It's like, yes, they could start stuff, but does that mean they're going to succeed with it? And there was a real interesting distinction that you drew, and I want to get more, like, dive a little deeper into this, and that there was a kind of difference between inattentive ADHD versus hyperactive ADHD vis-a-vis success. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So in the research I did, the traits that are associated with hyperactive and impulsive ADHD tracked much more strongly with positive entrepreneurial outcomes. Inattentive, it was kind of neutral. It wasn't positive, wasn't negative. It was just it didn't really correlate. But if it's hyperactive and impulsive, those are the things that really tracked well with new venture creation. So, think of high risk propensity, highly proactive, high sense of urgency, low premeditation, one of my favorite ones, low perseverance, high sensation seeking, high impulsivity, all those things. And imagine the context of an early stage venture or a growing venture. You can imagine where all those things can be really helpful, right? They're not super helpful in a button down corporate environment, perhaps, but in a high growth stage of companies development, they could be really advantageous. Yeah.
It's interesting because I'm on the inattentive scale, so I just never even thought that about differentiating on that and tracking that. So I think it's so important because, you know, we hear ADHD and people talk about it and it feels like, hey, it's this monolithic, you're ADHD or you're not. But there's just so many different ways that it expresses that it's important to have that distinction. And I think you did a really good job at that in the book.
Thanks. And you can show me 100 different people with impulsive and hyperactive ADHD, and they'll probably they'll have 100 different presentations, right? They're all different, and it is much like a spectrum. But just because you have hyperactive, impulsive ADHD doesn't mean that your traits are the same as the next one with that diagnosis. It's very individual and contextual.
Absolutely. And so important to keep in mind. They have a neurodiverse community. There's the saying, when you've met one autistic ADHD person, you've met one autistic ADHD person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really, looking at the things that really caught my attention in your book and your journey is really about, okay, so once you have that awareness, right, of, hey, I've got ADHD, it's given me some real strengths in being able to start and initiate and take some risks. It doesn't even feel like risk because it's so like, it's a special like hyper focus interest. And it's like, you risk doesn't almost come into it. It's like, I got to do it in order to make the hyper focus interest go. But so some of the things you talk about is, okay, so how do you work with that and manage that? And you talk something, you said something about the importance of managing your activity
Yeah.
and consumption.
Yeah. So if you think of the things you're doing and the things you're putting in your body, right? At the most basic level, that's what it is. So before you try any hack or technique or whatever you might see online or something, it's really important just to understand your consumption and your output, right? So on the consumption side, and this is something that over the past couple years I've developed. I started developing it for myself, right? Just very selfish, sample size of one to get to the bottom of it. And then I started to dive into the literature and realize, okay, there's some generalization that we could make here. So just working on your physical and mental and spiritual self first, right? So the analogy I like to use is, your body's the car, your business is the road or the destination. Yes, you can get there with a car that you haven't maintained or is in poor running condition, but it's not going to be, quite as fun. You're not going to get there as quickly and that sort of thing. So maintaining the vehicle, maintaining your body, your mind, body, and spirit, first thing you should think about. All right. So are you sleeping? Do you track your sleep? Do you feel pretty good in the morning? Do you not feel pretty good in the morning? All of the research I've read points to that as one of the first things you should do. So, and I would recommend this, I'm not a physician, I'm a PhD, but before anybody goes down the medication route, I would highly recommend that they take a look at some of these basics, their sleep, their nutrition, and their exercise. Like what does that look like? Because you could set the table for even a more successful medication regimen if you get that under control, right? So in terms of the consumption, what are you taking in through your mouth, through your eyes, and your ears, right? So do you consume a lot of alcohol? If so, we know your ADHD symptoms are going to be exacerbated, and the downside is what's going to be dominant the next day, probably the next 2 days. What are you eating? Are you starting your day with sugar, with dyes, cereal? Like, are you starting your day with Fruit Loops or Captain Crunch, right? Worst possible thing you could do because now you've set the stage for an absolutely terrible day from a blood glucose, from a neurological perspective, everything, right? Are you hydrated? Something so basic as that can have a real ramification, right? So what are you taking in? Are you the person that has, 3 screens? You got a stock ticker over here. You got WhatsApp for web. You've got your message you're like, what are you consuming, through your eyes and ears? Do you have a news scroll going? What's going on, right? So that's the input. So think about your consumption first, and then think about what your output is. So from an output perspective, well, what do you do? Like, are you getting up from your desk and moving around? Are you just, do you have a movement practice? Do you do something that can get the blood flowing, right? That helps this, brain derived neurotropic factor, which is really important, dopamine, all that stuff that we know about, right? The other thing that's important that we don't often think about in terms of activity is, what are you doing from a work perspective? Like, I can't even tell you how many ADHD entrepreneurs that I work with that do this. They feel like they have to know it all. They've got to do it all. They've got to grind and push. And if they can't figure it out, they feel stupid or whatever. The thing I always tell them is, there's somebody out there who actually likes to do that thing that you hate, and they're really good at it. And they like it, right? So it's in your best interest just to say, forget it. I don't like it. I'm not good at it. I'm going to have the person who does like it and is good at it doing it, which frees me up to do the things that I'm really good at. Because if I'm forcing myself to do all the things and half of those things I kind of suck at, I'm not doing the things I'm good at. So the organization's suffering, I'm suffering, my team's suffering. So yeah, it's just thinking about what you're taking into your body and then what you're actually doing with it. That's the important thing.
Yeah. It makes so much sense as I've gotten up to speed on it and gone deep. It's like it's all an executive function game and being able to manage that. But basically, nervous system and emotional regulation is the gateway, is like that's going to give you access. So if your body is like, there's so many different ways to get dysregulated, and our coping mechanisms start to work against us. So if we're like, oh, I need caffeine and sugar to get going in the morning, well, that's actually going to like cause those roller coaster spikes, and there's a downside to it. And yeah, so yeah, doing the basics of like managing your body and what you consume, and the way I'm curious to like to hear your take on this. The way I've been thinking about delegation, because delegation is problematic for ADHD brains, because a lot of times it's all organic and all smushed together. It's like I can't even tell you how I do things. I just do them, and documentation is a hard game. It's like you're gonna make me put everything in an order and express it. And yes, I can talk it out, but and then I gotta give feedback. But the way I've been starting to do this is because it's a huge unlock. You're absolutely right. Like I see lots of, and this was myself up until like this year is like, I want to do it all on my own because I could, but to think about it as we're not just delegating the task, but the executive function, because it's all like I fired myself from my email inbox and my calendar basically, because it's like,
Perfect. That was a good move. Yeah.
because scheduling kills me. It's, 365 times 24 options. And it just,
Yeah. Oh, my calendar mismanagement is epic.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So, in terms of other things you see, because you've both done it from the experience of taking companies from ideas to exits and all that, and you're also studying it from an academic point of view. What are the characteristics that you see the most for ADHD entrepreneurs who like lock in and get it and start to make progress and succeed?
Yeah, I think the one trait that seems to be the most advantageous, or the thing that does exactly what you're talking about, is resilience. And those of us with ADHD have baked in an enormous amount of resilience throughout our lives, but out of necessity, right? We've had to bounce back from a variety of things, a lot of them self-imposed or self-inflicted, but as a cohort, we tend to be pretty resilient. So the ability to be resilient is really important. And you can draw a direct line in elite performance in anything, athletics, music, anything, to elite performance in business. And one of the biggest things is just being resilient. And I think one of the ADHD trait might be, I think they call it lack of perseverance, which basically means you get over things quickly, right? So when I talk to elite athletes or work with them, one of the things they talk about is that you can't perseverate or focus on the thing you just screwed up, because it's going to get in your head and you're going to screw the next thing up as a result. And you can imagine how that works in business too, right? So the common term they use is you just got to flush it. You got to move on. You got to focus on the next thing. And because of our lack of perseverance, or the fact that we can move on relatively quickly because we've had to do it our whole lives and that's the way we're wired, that is an enormously helpful trait. So just being able to stand back up, dust yourself off and keep going, that is the thing, in my experience, both on the academic side and the practical side, that really helps probably the most. And it kind of goes with this adaptability. So what my work has been focused on is, okay, if resilience is the thing, how do we improve people's resilience? Right. And there's all sorts of very evidence-based techniques to improve resilience, which will then improve your performance in a variety of areas.
Makes so much sense. That's where working memory or having deficits in working memory can be an advantage, as like you move on. And it's like the next, what do the cornerbacks say, next play, golfers say next stroke. You got to leave it behind you. The one of the things I see, and I'm curious to get your perspective on this, in the people I coach and the ADHD entrepreneurs I work with a lot, is that there's a paralysis that happens in deciding a lot of stuff, but like, how do you, I call it the great wall of everything now, right? Because ADHD brains make everything equally important, equally urgent. How do you, see people like getting out of that kind of decision paralysis and into action?
Yeah, and that's a good That's a good example of the difference between inattentive and hyperactive, right? Because inattentive type ADHD, that is very prominent. Whereas hyperactive and impulsive, it's almost the opposite. Like it's called lack of premeditation. Like they don't overthink things, right? They just do. So where that doesn't work for you, lack of premeditation, you look like you're rushing decisions or making bad decisions, or you're just jumping into something without thinking it all the way through. When it's working for you, then you look like you're fast acting, fast thinking, that kind of thing, right? So it's actually a really good example of the distinction between two different types of ADHD.
That's a really good point because I'm thinking about I just finished a cohort of my focus formula group and program, and I'm thinking back between, you know, now applying that lens of inattentive versus impulsive on that and going, oh, okay, I can see a distinction there.
Yeah. And there is also a correlation with the inattentive type and the premeditation or the overanalysis. There's rejection sensitive dysphoria, which I'm sure you've heard of. That is amplified in that type because you don't really want to make a decision because you're worried about the rejection, and you're so you've got such dysphoria about it that it is impacting your ability to go ahead and make the decision. So I think, even though I haven't read a lot about it, I mean, I've read a few studies. Yeah, it's just because it's been an interest of mine, especially because I've had a few students who experience that. But there is a link there that probably is worth investigating more.
I think that's really, really on point because when I look at success in entrepreneurship, the people who tend to be successful are people that just go and do.
Yeah.
Like even if they're going off half cocked, it's because the only way you get information from the market is to actually put stuff out there and get the response back, and that moves you forward, even if it's not a great result or the result you hope for. Whereas if you're in an inattentive paralysis and you're slower to put stuff out in market, it's actually going to hinder your ability to move the business forward.
Yeah, and the way our brains work, at least with the hyperactive impulsive, is so in a corporate button down environment, right? You get it, you take all the information, you deliberate, you decide, and then you take action. In the ADHD world, we take action first, right? And then we evaluate the results of that action, and then we reorganize and act again based on that input. One's not right or wrong, it's just different. The ADHD way of doing it doesn't necessarily fit into a corporate environment that well, but it is very functional when you have to start a new company or grow a company. So yeah, that's a good example.
You brought to mind an example of exactly that. Like when my startup got acquired, we got acquired into a bigger company, and I would just do stuff like, because I hadn't worked in like a corporate leadership team. And so like somebody needed a new computer and she was selling something, I was trying to make my earn out. And I was like, they gave her an old computer and we had a spare MacBook Air lying around. I just gave it to her. And, I got a little bit of a chewing out for like just willy nilly giving people, what they need. And it was just like, but that was exactly it. I could feel the difference in speed and kind of how you had to work. And it took me a little while to kind of adjust.
And your instinct was right, and it served you well up until that point. You were just trying to solve a problem as quickly as possible because you had 10 others waiting for you, right? But that doesn't work in an environment that is very process and policy and procedure oriented,
Yeah, it's one of those things, and this is also the duality. Another duality of ADHD and entrepreneurship is like that structure, that corporate structure, 9 to 5, whatever it looks like these days, like is can be almost claustrophobic to an ADHD brain. But then when you go out and say you're solopreneuring or entrepreneuring, that structure that you had, suddenly you have to create, and ADHD brains often aren't great at creating that kind of structure to like actually like manage the day, the week, the month, and work towards things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is, I think you pinpointed the struggle, like the biggest struggle that I see. Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been such an awesome conversation. The book is called Lightning in a Bottle, and where can people get it? And where can people find out more about what you do?
Yeah, Amazon is the best place for the book. You can visit me at my website, johnmtorrens.com. I'm on TikTok, Dr. John M. Torrens. I'm on Instagram, John M. Torrens, LinkedIn, John M. Torrens. Yeah, check it out. I love talking to entrepreneurs with ADHD. My big passion lately has just been on this protocol that I've been developing for myself that I'm starting to work with some other students and clients on. And it's really all about that resilience training, nervous system regulation, so you can build on a solid foundation. So that's what's getting me really excited lately.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put the links into all your links in below on the show notes, and we'll have that. And yeah, it sounds like you've got some more interesting stuff cooking. So, hopefully we'll have you back on the podcast and you can talk more about what's come from that, because I think that emotional regulation and the resilience is so key.
Yeah, it really is. Well, yeah, thanks, Steve. This is fun. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it was great having you. And everybody check out Dr. John Torrens, all his links below. Check out the book. It's a really good read. It opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I have been like deep into ADHD for the last 3 or 4 years as I've been getting up to it. So this book will definitely give you a lot to think about and some really, really important things that you can then use to further your own success. So appreciate you being here. Great talking with you. And that'll do it for this episode of ADHD Entrepreneur Accelerator. If you enjoyed it, give us a 5-star or give it a like and a follow on the YouTube. You know the drill. Like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time. Talk to you soon.